Welcome to channel. Today, we explore story filled with unexpected twists. Please, subscribe and like to stay updated. Let's begin. The scream of the helicopter blades above me was deafening, but it was a sound I had come to like. It indicated that we were on our way to the next assignment. I'd flown in and out of these harsh mountains more times than I could count, yet there was always a buzz, a terrible exhilaration in my belly knowing what we were getting ourselves into. This was our work, and this was our life. The sun was beginning to set behind the craggy peaks, spreading lengthy shadows across the rocky ground. I was concentrated, scanning the horizon with one eye on the radio and the other on the constantly shifting scenery below. Our crew was stationed in a secluded region where every rock might conceal an enemy sniper, but we had a mission to complete. Chopper 6, you're cleared to land, the voice said over the comms. We were approaching the drop zone. It's time to prepare. Everything occurred so quickly that it seemed like a haze. We were flying nicely, and the mission was on schedule. Then there was a brilliant, quick flash, followed by the horrible crunch of metal, and then a powerful, thunderous explosion. The missile struck the tail rotor. I didn't hear the contact, but I felt a shock and a sense of free fall as the helicopter dipped to the left. My heart pounded into my chest, and the whole cabin shook fiercely. Instinct kicked in. I grabbed the straps of my seatbelt and ripped them off, leaping into action. My head was a fog, but I knew I needed to remain calm. I had a squad to preserve. My legs screamed in agony as I fought to rise, but there wasn't time to dwell on it. The helicopter was coming down, and the enemy was closing in. Although we were able to level out, the harm had already been done. The rotor was shot, forcing us to crash land in a valley surrounded by dangerous terrain. Dust and dirt filled the air, and everything became quiet except for the ringing in my ears. I was the first one out of the debris. My right leg felt like it had been hit with a sledgehammer, yet it was not fractured. That was something, at least. I struggled to my feet, suffering with each step, yet my mind was calm. Get on the team. The helicopter was down, but the job had not ended. My crew was rattled up, some were wounded, some dazed, but I didn't have time to assess the damage. Gunfire erupted from the hills, and I saw lights in the distance, shots from the enemy attempting to close in on our position. They were expecting for us to perish in the accident. Form up. We're moving, I said to the others. Despite my beating pulse, my voice remained calm. We didn't have much time. They were going to come for us. I grabbed the closest weapon, my fingers drenched in perspiration, and started heading for higher ground. My unit was with me, and we had to take out those attempting to kill us off. We battled our way up the slope, using the terrain as cover, and I could hear bullets cracking too near for comfort. My right leg felt like it was dragging behind me, but excitement propelled me forward. The agony in my leg was nothing compared to the intense need to keep my guys alive. We were outnumbered, I realized, but we would not go down without a fight. I knelt behind a rock, trying to keep my breathing calm while I aimed and shot, seeing the enemies fall one by one. My heart was beating, but I couldn't afford to dwell on it. We needed to clear the area. We needed to survive. It seemed like hours before we gained control of the situation. By then, I could hardly put weight on my leg, and my eyesight was fuzzy from weariness and blood loss, but I persisted. My crew survived, and that was all that counted. We needed to go back to base, but we couldn't risk waiting for evacuation with the enemy still out there. When the rescue helicopter eventually came, I was the last to board. My leg had given up, and my body felt like it was going to collapse, but I was able to get myself onto the helicopter. We made it. Barely. The trip home was a whirl of agony and tiredness. The war was ended for me, but not for everyone. We had lost excellent guys that day, and I couldn't get the pictures of their faces out of my head. My leg damage was severe enough that I was released shortly after. The limp I had would never completely go away, but that wasn't what stuck with me. What lingered with me was the knowledge that I'd seen guys at their worst and finest. I'd seen and experienced the true meaning of loyalty, sacrifice, and brotherhood. I went away from that fight with my body damaged but my soul intact. I never discussed it with anybody, including Alyssa, the men back at the station, or the physicians or therapists they sent me to once I returned. What was there to say? I felt robbed out of something. I had this work, this goal, and then one blasted missile, and everything changed. That limp, the discomfort in my leg, the thought that I wasn't the guy I once was, it tormented me every time I woke up. But what could I do? I could have pushed harder, battled through the agony, and maybe found a way to remain in the fight longer. Instead, I was trapped here, at home, with a life I did not believe I deserved. The home was peaceful, too quiet. Alyssa used to like the commotion and the rush. She had an enthusiasm that pervaded every space, making even the simplest moments seem important. But that was before. Now I could sense it in the way she looked at me, as if I were a stranger, or worse, a disappointment. She always desired the best for herself. I could not blame her for it. She earned it. She worked hard to ensure that we had the best things, such as clothing, automobiles, and a home, the type of life that made others remark, "They've got it all." She adored that. She enjoyed being seen and being appreciated. But she couldn't bear the idea that I was always here. I was no longer the guy she married, the man who was away doing something important and meaningful to her. I was simply a person who hobbled about the house, staring out the window while she prepared for another night out with her pals. "Logan, are you just going to sit there all day?" Alyssa's angry voice broke the stillness one afternoon. I didn't realize how long I'd been sitting on the sofa, gazing at nothing. The television was on, but I was not watching it. I couldn't concentrate on anything for long these days. I did not respond straight away. I understood exactly what she wanted, as she usually did. She wanted me to be active, go out with her, and be the guy I used to be. But I didn't think I could be that guy anymore, after all I'd seen and done. She turned on her heel, irritation evident in her motions as she grabbed her handbag off the table. "You don't even care anymore, do you?" she demanded. "This isn't the life I signed up for. I thought you'd be different when you came home, but you're just sitting here, wasting away." Her words pierced deeper than any gunshot could. I knew how she felt. She did not sign up for this. She didn't want a spouse who couldn't keep up with her anymore. She desired excitement, adventure, and a happy life, which I was no longer able to provide. "You know, it's not that simple," I answered quietly. I did not want to fight, but it was already too late. The tension in the room was intense, like a storm about to erupt. "Not that simple. You've been home for months, and you've done nothing but sit here. The only thing you've accomplished is getting in my way," the woman said. Her remarks were harsh, but I knew they came from a place of pain, even if I had no idea how to approach her. "I can't keep living like this," I muttered, getting up abruptly, feeling every pain in my body, every scar from the battle. My leg was throbbing with agony, but I pushed through. "I didn't ask for this either, Alyssa. I didn't ask to come back here and feel like I don't belong in my own home." "Well, maybe you don't," she said, her voice shaking. I saw something in her eyes that I had not seen in a long time, desperation. "I don't know who you are anymore, Logan. You used to be someone who was out there making a difference. Now you're just here, moping around, pretending like the world doesn't exist." I wanted to yell at her, tell her everything that was bothering me, but the words wouldn't come. My thoughts was still consumed by pictures from Iraq, the faces of soldiers who did not return home, and the remorse I felt for not being able to do more. I couldn't be the guy she needed, especially since I couldn't even face myself some days. "I'm trying," I murmured gently, unsure if I was trying for her or simply staying sane. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know what you want from me. You don't even try to understand what I need," she said, her voice cracking. "You don't see me anymore. You don't see our son. You just sit there in your own little world." "Our son," I said quietly, and it was the only thing that got through to me. His grin and laughing were the only things in this entire disaster that felt genuine. Even with him, I couldn't get rid of the sensation that I was failing him, failing all of us. I tried to be the spouse she wanted, the soldier I used to be, but it seemed like I was losing myself. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't locate that guy again. Every battle with Alyssa seemed like one more step away from who I was meant to be. Every dispute made me question whether I was still the guy I used to be, or if I was only a shadow, a ghost of the man I once was. "Maybe we need a break," I replied after a lengthy pause. The words escaped my lips before I could stop them. "Maybe I need a break," I said. She didn't say anything at first, but gazed at me with a hardened expression and narrowed eyes. I could see her displeasure, and it struck me like a punch in the stomach. "Fine," she eventually said, her voice frigid. "Maybe you do." And with that, the gap between us widened, like an ocean separating us from the love we previously had. I knew things couldn't continue like this, but I didn't know how to repair it. The war had taken so much away from me, and now it seemed like it was stealing my family as well. It had been many weeks since their argument with Alyssa. Things weren't improving at home, and the continual strain was driving me down. I knew I needed to do something, anything, to get out of that place, away from the noise, the judgment, and the guilt. I couldn't sit there anymore feeling like a failure. So I began searching for jobs. I wasn't sure what I wanted, but I needed something to give me purpose again. That was what I missed the most when I returned home, a sense of purpose, the belief that what I was doing was important. I couldn't find it at home, especially because Alyssa was always telling me of how much I had changed. I wanted something to help me concentrate on anything other than the chaos. That's when I discovered the advertisement for a security contractor. The firm was modest, local, and not very showy, but I felt it was my chance. I had the abilities. I had this experience. I'd gone through hell and back in combat, running operations, managing teams, and handling security, all of which I had done for years in the military. I simply wanted to show someone that I still had it. I strolled inside the office and met the owner, James Harris. He was a no-nonsense type of man, clothed in a plain suit, his eyes keen from having seen too much. When I handed him my resume, he didn't blink. He just read it and stared me dead in the eye. "Marine? Huh? Iraq? Iraq?" he said, fully knowing the answer before I could speak. "Yeah," I said. "I've got the experience. I know how to handle pressure, lead teams, and get the job done." He did not hesitate. "You're hired. You start tomorrow. Head of operations. Pays good. You won't regret it." I could not believe it. Just like that. There will be no drawn-out interviews or examinations. He only saw what was on paper and believed it. Perhaps it was my military experience or something else, but I didn't mind. I had a real career, and I didn't have to sit at home every day and watch my life deteriorate. The next morning, I reported for duty. They delegated authority for operations to me. It was a large responsibility, yet I did not feel overwhelmed. I felt alive again. There were issues to resolve, plans to implement, and teams to lead. It was the kind of job that kept my mind focused and made me feel like I was contributing to something greater than myself. What about the paycheck? Damn, it was better than I had hoped, more than enough to pay my expenses and keep things running while I worked out what to do about the situation at home. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a purpose. There were no nagging voices at home, no one questioned my value, and no one reminded me of my limitations. At work, I was in charge. I had a purpose, and it felt great. It didn't take long for me to get into the routine at the security firm. At first, I concentrated only on operations management, scheduling, supervising teams, and ensuring that everything worked well. But it wasn't long before I was put in circumstances that required more of me, situations that reminded me of why I had been recruited in the first place. The job was more than just paperwork and checklists. It was about keeping people safe and preventing things from going wrong when the stakes were high. The first incidents occurred around 6 months into my new employment. We had a contract with a local bank to offer additional protection overnight, and I was in charge of the patrol squad. One night, I received a call from a guard. He spotted something strange. 2 guys in a vehicle stopped on the street, simply observing the building. It was delicate, but I'd come to trust my senses. I asked him to keep an eye on them, then drove over to check for myself. When I arrived, I parked across the street and watched. Sure enough, the males did not seem to be simply hanging around. Despite the fact that it wasn't very chilly, they wore thick jackets and kept glancing around anxiously. I could feel the tension in the air, a sensation that something was off. I phoned James to notify him and then contacted the local police, but I did not want to wait for them to come. I gathered a few of security personnel, and we approached the vehicle silently in the dark. By the time the police came, we had the 2 males on the ground with their hands secured behind their back. They had planned to loot the bank's vault and had been waiting for the perfect opportunity to attack. My fast thinking catching them before they could make a move had saved the day. The authorities were pleased, but honestly, I didn't think it was that noteworthy. Just another day doing what I knew I needed to do. A few months later, it occurred again, although in a different area. We were managing security for a local jeweler's business when I received word that one of the cameras had gone down. While I was traveling there, I quickly dispatched a crew to examine the premises. I overheard a radio report regarding a suspicious car outside the business. As soon as I came there, I saw it, a black vehicle parked across the street, with a guy wearing a ski mask in the passenger seat. It was too silent. I took no risks this time. I summoned the police, but I also requested assistance from our own team. We built up a perimeter around the business to ensure that no one could enter or exit without our knowledge. Within minutes, a second guy emerged from the alley, making directly toward the jewelry store's rear door. I was already on the go. I approached the guy, pulling out my firearm just in case. My military training kicked in automatically. Long story short, we caught them both attempting to break in and stopped them before they could reach the store's vault. The police came soon after, and I gave them a quick overview of everything. My heart was beating, but it felt wonderful to know I had stopped another crime before it happened. The third event was particularly noteworthy. A few months back, we were entrusted with providing protection for a transport vehicle transporting cash from a local bank. The path had been planned, and everything seemed to be in order, yet something felt off. The driver had been behaving strangely, fidgeting continuously and checking his rearview mirror. I knew better than to disregard my gut emotions. I changed the route at the last minute, making a few twists along the way. Sure enough, as soon as the truck completed its diversion, two cars began tailing it, driving aggressively and attempting to surround it. They didn't expect anybody to notice. I was watching the route remotely and observed everything happen in real time. I phoned the driver and told him to remain calm and obey my commands. The backup I had prepared came in minutes, and we apprehended the thieves before they could move. The driver was shocked, but uninjured, and the money was secure. The crooks had no clue what had struck them. They were arrested on the spot, and I received several accolades for my fast thinking. However, it did not feel particularly exceptional. I was only performing my job, using the talents I had developed in war. One thing I had going for me was the ability to remain cool under pressure, think quickly, and act before things got out of hand. I thought that after the episodes, Alyssa would view me in a new way. For a short time, I hoped she'd realize I wasn't simply some man sat at home all day, watching the world go by. The accolades I received for halting those acts should have meant something to her. But when I informed her about it, her reply was unexpected. She listened, yes, but not in a way that made me feel noticed or proud of what ID accomplished. She did not even say a word of congrats. It was as if she was hearing it but not really comprehending it. "That's great," she remarked almost casually, as if she was trying to be encouraging but couldn't quite get it out. "At least you're doing something now." Something about that phrase seemed off. It seemed dismissive, like if what I'd done didn't matter to her. I expected her to ask more questions, to show real interest in the fact that I had averted not one, but 3 serious crimes. But there was none. Just quiet, a few more murmurs about her day, then a hasty change of topic. It stung. It really did. I kept telling myself it didn't matter, that I wasn't doing it for her approval, but for me. However, I could not escape the sensation of disappointment. Perhaps I was deceiving myself, believing that my actions might influence how she saw me. It wasn't just about the work or the accolades. It was about feeling as if I still meant anything to her. And when she didn't show it, when she didn't care about the things that made me feel good about myself, I started questioning everything. Was I no longer an important part of her life? Was she too engrossed in her own world to realize what I was doing or attempting to build? I didn't need her to compliment me, but a little recognition would have been appreciated. Instead, I felt invisible to her, as if she had already moved on in her thoughts and that the person I used to be, the one who battled for our future, was no longer the guy she cared about. And that hurt more than anything. I'd been thinking about it for a long. Something wasn't right between us. The quiet at supper, the fact that we seldom spoke anymore, and the increasing distance I could sense between us. Everything had been dragging on me. The most difficult thing had been the absence of sex. I couldn't remember the last time we'd been truly intimate, and I despised it. I hated how I was starting to feel like we were strangers living under the same roof. That day, I left work early. I promised myself I'd make the time to sit down with her and finally speak to her about everything. I couldn't continue dodging the issue, and I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was good when it wasn't. When I arrived home, Alyssa was sitting on the sofa, browsing through a magazine. The home was quiet, the type of quietness that made everything seem heavier than it should. She didn't even glance up as I stepped in. "Alyssa, we need to talk," I began, attempting to remain cool, but even I could hear the desperation in my tone. She gave a short peek up before dropping the magazine, without saying anything. I stood there for a time, wondering how to begin. I knew the talk wouldn't be easy, but it needed to be done. "I think things between us aren't right," I remarked softly. "We don't talk the way we used to. There's no real connection anymore, and I can't ignore it any longer." She did not answer at first, just glanced at me. I could see a flash of familiarity in her eyes, as if she knew where this was headed but wasn't sure she wanted to hear it. "I'm talking about everything, Alyssa. The silence, the distance, and yeah, the sex. It's like we've just stopped, and I don't know what happened or when it happened, but it's hurting me." I feel like we've lost something, something that used to matter to both of us. Alyssa folded her arms and leaned back on the sofa, her face serene and indifferent. For a time, it seemed that she wasn't taking the subject seriously. Then she ended the stillness. Well, I suppose now's as good a time as any to tell you. You're no longer what I want in my life, she continued, her voice firm. You used to be a physical specimen, but not anymore. You used to be a great cook, but that's long gone. You've just started earning again, and while that's nice, it's not enough. I wanted more out of life. I wanted a husband who could cook well, was physically exceptional, and financially secure. Since you don't fit the bill in any of those areas anymore, I made some changes. And since I couldn't find one man with all those qualities, I found three. Her comments struck me like a punch in the belly, but her tone stayed firm as she sat across from me, staring me straight in the eyes. You want the truth? She said, her gaze narrowing slightly. Fine. There's a chef. A chef? I repeated, almost disbelieving. Yes. He's an amazing cook. Far better than you ever were, she responded without hesitation. Every meal he makes is like art. When I'm with him, I feel special, something you never managed to do in the kitchen. And sure, I had sex with him on the kitchen table, exactly there, she said, pointing to the table. I attempted to digest her comments, but before I could answer, she said, and then there's a gym instructor. I shook my head slightly, trying to keep up. A gym instructor? Yes, she responded, her voice steady. He's everything you're not, muscular, fit, and powerful. He does things to me that you have never done. He did it while I was standing right here in this room, and guess what? My feet never touched the earth. My chest constricted as rage bubbled under the surface. And the third? I asked, my voice low. She grinned slightly, almost smugly. A businessman. He's rich and powerful. He understands how to make things happen. Marcus makes me feel significant while we are together. He offers me the life I've always desired, a life you could never deliver. Also, yesterday, he had sex with me in his Bentley. I looked at her, startled into silence for a minute. So that's it? You have replaced me with 3 guys. One for each area you believe I failed in? She shrugged, her voice devoid of sorrow. I needed more than you could provide, Marcus. I wanted a partner who could cook, was physically fit, and could give me with the lifestyle I deserved. Because you couldn't offer me all I needed, I looked for someone else who could. Each of them offers me something you can't, and they're all aware of one another. They're fine sharing me with one another. I clenched my hands beneath the table, fighting to keep my cool. How long has this been going on? Since you were deployed, she said bluntly. You were gone, and I was lonely. I knew I deserved better, so I went out and got it. Her words wounded harder than I thought possible. I wanted to scream, to let my wrath take over, but instead I took a deep breath and shook my head. After a long moment, I uttered the only thing that made sense. I'm done, I murmured calmly, my voice firm. It's time for a divorce. You have made a mockery of our marriage, and there is no going back. The natural next step is to stop it. They'll grant you the divorce since you already have guys taking care of you. I guess you won't need any financial assistance from me. And it's evident that our kid is not a priority for you. He'll take care of Connor. Alyssa leaned back, crossed her arms with a smug smile, and laughed sharply. A divorce? Just like that? Oh no, Marcus, it won't be that simple. Her remarks took me off guard. But before I could answer, she said, I gave you a son, Marcus. I had sex with you and remained loyal for years, even when I didn't have to. Do you believe that has any value? Value? I repeated, my disbelief clear in my voice. You believe that loyalty in a marriage should be rewarded when you've been unfaithful for years? She completely disregarded my inquiry and said, I want 80% of your assets, including the house. I stood up, attempting to maintain my cool despite the rage growing inside me. Alyssa, I will give you $50,000 and nothing else. Do not push your luck. Her smug smirk faded into a bitter frown. $50,000? She scoffed. You are being ridiculous, Marcus. Fine. If that's the way you want to play it, he'll take Connor. And you know what? They'll have him address all 3 of them as daddy, the chef, the gym teacher, and the businessman. They'll all be greater dads for him than you ever could. Her comments struck me like a blow in the belly, but before I could answer, she pushed in, her voice full of hatred. He'll make sure Connor knows every single day that his father was the villain, that you're nothing but a bad man who ruined everything. My jaw clenched as I gazed at her, my anger building with every word she uttered. But then she did something I didn't believe she'd do. "And if you push me too hard, Marcus," she said, her tone chilly and precise, "it'll make you regret it. I will file domestic abuse accusations against you. You are aware of how so-called soldiers with PTSD are perceived. It would not be difficult to persuade a judge that you are unstable. We can easily send you to a mental hospital." I took a step closer to her, my voice low and steady, but each word was meaningful. "Alyssa, you are attempting to hunt something you cannot kill. You have till I pack my belongings and walk out of here to reconsider. But hear this. After I walk out that door, you'll have hell to pay." She leaned back, crossed her arms, and smirked. "You think you can terrify me? Marcus, you're all talk. Go ahead and walk out. It doesn't affect anything." I didn't respond. Instead, I turned and walked upstairs. The only thing that broke the silence was the sound of my footsteps on the stairs. I grabbed a duffel bag and threw in enough clothes to last me a while. My hands worked quickly and methodically, but my mind was swirling with a mix of anger, disbelief, and a strange sense of clarity. This was the end, and I wasn't going to look back. As I came down the stairs, bag slung over my shoulder, I paused for a moment, looking at her one last time. She was seated on the couch, calm and leaving so soon. She said mockingly, "Good. Now I can really show you what I am capable of." "You're nothing, Alyssa," I said firmly, my gaze fixed on hers. "And from now on, I'm going to make sure you know it. I will destroy you. You will regret ever crossing me." I didn't answer more. Instead, I moved to the door, opened it, and stepped outside, closing it behind me without looking back. As soon as I was out the door, Alyssa took up her phone with a smug look and dialed rapidly. When the line connected, her voice changed to a sweet tone. "Blake," she murmured, her tone full of joy. "I've done it. I forcibly removed Logan from the home. It is finally occurring. Now I need you to phone the lawyer you named. I want the finest. I want to make sure I win." She stopped and listened to his remark before chuckling gently. "Of course, you're always so dependable. Let me know as soon as it's done." She hung up and phoned another number, this time in a fun, taunting tone. "Derek," she began, her voice full of flirting. "Guess what? The home is now all mine, and I could use some company. Why not come over tonight? I need a workout." She chuckled a low, sexy sound. "You're the only one who can help me with that." After the connection ended, she groaned and scrolled through her contacts before dialing again. This time, her voice softened and took on a fond tone. "Ethan," she said warmly, "I was thinking about you. Let's plan for tomorrow. You may cook for me again. You know how much I like it when you do." I had seen enough, and the image of her with those guys, her utter contempt for all we had, left me feeling empty. I had walked away, but I knew she would not let go so easily, and the worst part was that I wasn't sure whether I was angry or relieved. I climbed into my car and drove, the night air biting at my skin as I made my way to the only place I could think of where I might find some semblance of peace. The familiar streets seemed different now, as if they had lost their meaning, just like everything else, and my mind raced with thoughts of what would happen next. There would be no going back, not after everything that had happened. When I pulled up to the bar, I didn't have to look for it. The dimly lit sign was a beacon of familiarity. I walked in, the sound of quiet conversation and clinking glasses surrounding me. Emma, the bartender, was behind the counter, and she saw me and gave me a knowing smile, as if she knew what was on my mind. I sat at the bar, ordered my usual, and nursed a glass of bourbon. The warmth went through me, and for a small minute, I allowed myself to relax. It had been a hard day, and all I needed was some quiet, but it appeared that serenity was not something I was meant for. The door swung open, and Alyssa's harsh voice pierced the room like a blade. "There he is," she yelled. I didn't look back. Instead, I closed my eyes for a short moment and breathed deeply, allowing the rage to boil under the surface. "Logan, did you really think you could clear out the accounts and walk away like a big man?" She spit, her shoes tapping on the hardwood floor as she marched at me. I turned in my seat, my glass still in hand, and took a calm drink before responding. "I had people to pay, Alyssa. Bills do not disappear simply because you've been playing home with your friends." Her face twisted in wrath, but before she could respond, one of her men, Derek McDonald, the gym rat she'd been sleeping with, rushed up to me, his muscles straining against his too-tight shirt as he grabbed me by the collar. "Do you think you can insult her like that?" Derek hissed, his face too near to be comfortable. I looked down at his hand and then back up at him, cool as ever. "You might want to let go," I stated bluntly. He didn't, So I did what I had to do. I quickly grabbed his wrist and twisted it forcefully, causing him to shriek, a high-pitched, miserable sound that rang throughout the pub. "Let go," Derek said, his voice breaking. "Boy, you squeal like a girl," I said, releasing him. Derek fell back, gripping his wrist like a wounded animal. I spotted Ethan, the chef, standing a few steps back. He seemed like he wanted to help but decided against it. But then Blake, the businessman, decided he was the tough one in the group, and he went forward, adjusting his jacket as if he were entering a boardroom. "This isn't over," Blake replied, his voice firm but his eyes full of misguided confidence. "I'm going to rip you apart, Logan." I bent my head and studied him for a time. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise," Blake remarked, moving closer. Blake fell back, gripping his face as blood spilled between his fingers. Before he could blink, my fist struck his nose, and the crunch was clear. "Guess that didn't work out for you," I remarked, shaking my hand. Emma, the bartender who'd witnessed it all, grabbed Alyssa's wrist in midair. Emma's expression was deadpan, and her hand sprang out, heading for my face, but it never hit. "I don't think so," Emma answered, her voice stern. "I may not strike women, but I have no such concerns. Trust me, it'll tear that arm out and slam it so far up your glory hole that it comes out of your mouth." Alyssa paused, her gaze darting across the room, as she saw a change in the bar. A couple of the regulars, big males who didn't tolerate drama, were suddenly standing with their arms crossed, gazing at her and her boyfriends. "It's not over," Alyssa screamed, but there was no venom in her words now. "No," I said, locking eyes with her. "It is now. Get out." Emma let out a giggle and poured me another bourbon as the door closed behind them. She paused for a minute, apparently struggling with her better judgment, before turning on her heel and marching out, her loves following after her like reprimanded dogs. "Always entertaining when you're around, Logan," she said, extending the glass toward me. "I'm glad I could provide the show," I said, raising the glass in a false toast. The bourbon burned on its way down, but it was a minor sting in comparison to the storm that was raging inside me. As I took another sip, the bar gradually returned to its usual hum, and I returned to my seat. Alyssa's smug look, the hubris of bringing those three clowns into my life, and yet believing she had the right to humiliate me, was one thing. But threatening to take my kid and force him to call her boyfriend's daddy? That crossed a boundary that no one, not even her, could afford to cross. For hours, I sat there, turning everything over in my mind. My first thought was to call the guys from the army, my old brothers in arms, who would pick up the phone in a heartbeat, no questions asked. They had helped me once before, after all, and they could scare the life out of Alyssa and her lovers, maybe even put them in the hospital for a while. But I wasn't naive. Alyssa wasn't someone who could be scared into submission. She'd thrive on it, twisting it into a narrative where she was the victim and I was the villain. Worse, she'd find a way to use it against me, take Connor away, drag me through the courts, and paint me as the abusive ex-husband. It would be her word against mine, and I couldn't risk losing my son, who was all that mattered in this mess. By the time I left the pub and went out into the cold night air, my mind was still racing. The notion of contacting the army remained, enticing me, but deep down I knew it wasn't the answer. Beating up her boyfriends wouldn't solve anything. It wouldn't deter her. I wandered the lonely streets, the distant buzz of the city my only company. My fists clenched and unclenched as the reality dawned on me. This wasn't going to end with words or threats. It was going to finish with blood. The notion chilled me, but it also offered a weird sort of clarity. If Alyssa and her lovers remained in the picture, my life would be a constant tug of war, with my son caught in the middle, and ID never know peace. But if they were removed, the idea hit me like a punch in the gut, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I let it settle, let it take root, and for the first time in years, I considered stepping into the darkness, doing something that couldn't be undone. Am I really going to do this? I mumbled under my breath, pausing in my steps. The answer came almost immediately. A part of me, the part that had survived war and seen men do unspeakable things to survive, knew the answer. Yes, I couldn't afford to play the good guy anymore. The system wouldn't protect me, the courts wouldn't listen to me, and Alyssa would make sure of that. I had to become the villain in this story. As I walked home, my mind began to work. I didn't have a plan yet, but I knew what needed to be done. It wasn't about vengeance or hatred. It was about survival and protecting Connor. By the time I arrived at my apartment, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't felt in weeks. Even if the details weren't clear yet, I'd step into the shadows if it meant doing what needed to be done. For Connor. For peace. There was no turning back now. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the phone in my hand, my thumb hovering over the call button as sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. I took a deep breath, the weight of what I was about to do pressing heavily on my chest, and finally pressed the number. The line rang twice before a deep, familiar voice answered. "It's been a long time, my friend," came the calm, measured tone, and I couldn't help but grin faintly at the corners of my lips. "Yeah, it has," I said. "Fuss Amigas 2014. That was the last time I saw you." "Oh, the good old days," the guy said, a hint of nostalgia in his voice. "How are you, Logan?" I gave a gentle laugh, though there wasn't much comedy about it. "I've been better." "And you, Major Diego Fernandez? Or should I say ex-Major?" He chuckled heartily, the sound as familiar as the desert heat we'd experienced together. "You are no longer a soldier of the nation, my buddy. These days, I manage my own business. You may say I've advanced in the world." The title cartel boss sounds appealing. We both chuckled, but the weight of unsaid knowledge lingered in the air. "I figured as much," I said thereafter. "I was wondering how long it would take for you to join your cousin's side." Lopez's voice took on a joking tone. "What can I say? It's in the blood." "But I wasn't here for light conversation," I replied, my tone serious. My grasp on the phone tightened. "I have an issue, Gabe. A nasty one. My wife has cheated on me with 3 separate guys. A chef, a fitness teacher, and a businessman. She's trying to bleed me dry and steal my son." The line became silent for a time as the severity of my remarks sank in. Then Lopez replied, his voice firm and serene. "That's rough, my friend. But I believe I know who can assist." His comments sent shivers down my spine. They were spoken with the confidence that only Lopez has. "Gracias, Gabe," I murmured gently. He didn't say much more, just a word of warning before disconnecting up. I sat there for a bit, the stillness of the kitchen now overwhelming. Minutes later, my phone buzzed, and I looked at the screen, an unknown number. I said, my voice firm despite the fury inside me. "What's the plan?" The voice on the other phone sounded calm, even unnerving. "Do you like soup?" I sat back in my chair, allowing my lips to curve into a wicked smirk, and the weight of the choice ID taken no longer seemed heavy, but rather like cold, calculated resolution. "Oh, yes," I said, my voice low but firm, and I'd like to order 4 bowls of it. The telephone became quiet for a time before the person on the other end giggled gently. They provided me no information or orders, just confirmation that things were in motion. A few hours later, I was waiting in line at the grocery store, my hand leisurely pushing the cart along while my eyes surveyed the shelves, though I hardly realized what I was looking at. My mind were elsewhere, racing over every possibility, every step that might follow. It was then that I noticed him, a man I didn't recognize. He walked straight toward me, his expression blank, his movements deliberate. He didn't say anything as he handed me a phone, an older model, cheap disposable, which I took without hesitation, my fingers curling around the cold plastic as he turned and walked away, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared. I glanced at the item for a time before it buzzed in my palm. I responded by putting it to my ear. "Marcus," the voice stated softly and calmly. I answered calmly, "What's the plan?" What followed was a brief and quick talk, with no names or extraneous words, just directives given in an authoritative and definitive tone. When the conversation finished, I slid the phone into my jacket pocket and left the shop. The air outside was chilly and calm, the only sound being the hum of streetlights. I stood there for a while, allowing the evening settle around me, before stepping off the curb with a feeling of purpose I hadn't had in years. There was no going back now. Blake Lee adjusted the cuff of his tailored suit as his Bentley glided through the bustling streets. The city noise was muted inside the luxury car, the faint hum of the engine a soothing reminder of his success. He scrolled through emails on his phone, distracted, as the vehicle turned a corner into a quieter stretch of road. Suddenly, the car jolted to a stop, and Blake looked up, startled to see a van skidding to a halt in front of him, blocking his path. Blake's breath caught in his throat as his driver instinctively reached for the door, but one of the men raised his weapon and barked, "Stay put," before the van's doors swung open and 3 men jumped out, their faces obscured by ski masks. Their movements were sharp and efficient, and their hands gripped firearms that gleamed in the late afternoon sun. Another person approached Blake's side of the vehicle and flung open the door. Out now, the guy hissed, his voice icy and mechanical. Blake paused for a single second, his mind racing with choices, but the shine of the pistol pushed against his side drove him to obey, and he walked out onto the street, hands up in surrender. Move, the guy barked, forcing Blake into the vehicle. Blake staggered but recovered his footing, his pulse hammering in his ears as he was dragged into the back of the van. The scent of oil and perspiration struck him as the door slammed shut, trapping him in darkness. Blake remained transfixed, attempting to control his breathing as his thoughts shouted with questions about who these guys were and what they wanted. The van roared to life and sped away. Later that evening, Brenda Lee sipped a glass of wine in her luxurious living room, the soft glow of a crystal chandelier casting warm light across the space, trying to push away the unease she'd felt all day. Blake hadn't called or texted, and while it wasn't unusual for him to be late, something felt off. Her phone rang on the coffee table, interrupting her thoughts. She took it up and scowled at the unknown number on the screen. For a minute, she considered leaving it on voicemail, but instinct compelled her to answer. Hello? She spoke hesitantly. Mrs. We have your husband, Lee, a cold, impersonal voice said. Brenda's heart halted. What? Who is this? What's happening? You'll find out soon enough, the voice said, unconcerned by her anxiety. Hey, race, what matters? We want $20 million. If you want Blake to be alive again, you must provide. There are no cops, no games, or you'll come to regret it. Brenda held the phone, her fingers becoming white. Wait, please, let me talk with him. How can I know whether he's alive? The call went dead. Her palm trembled as the weight of the situation struck her. She lost no time in calling the police, her voice hysterical as she described the terrifying phone conversation. Officers were summoned to her house, and the investigation started. Alyssa's heart skipped a beat as she heard the message from an acquaintance. Blake's been kidnapped, demanding a $20 million ransom. Panic flooded through her, and she grabbed her phone and hastily phoned a number she never imagined she'd call. The line rang twice before Logan answered. Hello? His tone was calm and neutral, as if he had just gotten a call that may alter everything. Alyssa wasted no time. Are you behind this? Did you have anything to do with Blake's kidnapping? Logan sat back in his chair, keeping his voice firm despite the inferno he imagined burning on her end. I don't know anything about that, he answered, his tone bland and unconcerned. I'm still at my mother's house, remember? The lie slid off his mouth as smoothly as silk, as if he'd practiced it in his head, bracing himself for her inevitable scrutiny. Alyssa's voice trembled, fury mingled with fear. Don't play games with me, Logan. Blake vanished shortly after the incident at the pub. This is no coincidence. Logan laughed gently, a planned sound intended to unnerve her. If you're so certain, maybe you should concentrate on locating Blake instead of spending time blaming me. Good luck, Alyssa. Before she could respond, he stopped the conversation and placed his phone face down on the table. He allowed himself a faint, grim grin for a short minute. Everything was going as planned, but he knew this was just the beginning. 2 days later, Derek McDonald was in the middle of his usual workout at the gym, the clinking of weights and the hum of treadmills forming a familiar backdrop. Between sets, he looked up and noticed a homeless man standing outside, staring through the glass. The man's gaze was uncomfortably intense, fixed on the gym-goers as if he were observing them as specimens. Derek grimaced as he saw several of the ladies inside exchange awkward looks, squirming uneasily beneath the man's unwavering gaze. His instincts kicked in. Something wasn't right. The situation worsened when the guy placed his face against the glass, covering it with filth and dampness, then started licking the window, eliciting gasps and murmurs from the audience within. Derek felt a rush of rage build in his chest, his protective instincts taking control. What the hell is this guy's problem? He mumbled under his breath, placing his weights down with a loud clang, unable to ignore the noise. Derek raced toward the gym's entrance, forcing the door open with enough force to rattle it, and approached the guy with his fists clenched and veins pulsating in his temples. Hey, Derek barked, his voice sharp and commanding. What the hell do you think you're doing? Get the heck out. The homeless guy moved his head slightly but did not answer. His glazed-over eyes appeared to gaze right through Derek, as if he were in some sort of trance. Without saying anything, the man quickly turned and shuffled away into the tiny alley alongside the gym. Derek's jaw clenched. He wasn't the kind of person to let anything like this slip without a second thought. He followed, his strides heavy and deliberate, the alley barely lighted, its walls scarred with graffiti, and the odor of wet concrete lingered in the air. Derek neared the turn, but the homeless guy was still ahead of him, moving deliberately. "Hey, I'm talking to you," Derek yelled, his voice booming in the small area. "You can't simply." His remarks were stopped short as he felt a severe ache in the back of his head. Before he could respond, muscular arms seized him and lifted him off the ground. "What the—" Derek struggled, his muscles straining, but it was no use. He was quickly overpowered. A van screeched to a stop nearby, its side door sliding open, and Derek was shoved inside with brutal efficiency, the door slamming shut behind him. The van sped away, its tires screeching as it disappeared into the night, leaving nothing but silence and unanswered questions in its wake. Back at the gym, no one had seen Derek depart. The unnerving meeting with the homeless guy would soon turn into a haunting mystery, but for the time being, all that remained was an uneasy feeling of foreboding. Alyssa's palm trembled as she grasped the phone, and her voice shook as she spoke. "Ethan, you don't understand. I know it's Logan. He's doing something. Blake and Derek are gone. Now you are the only one left, and I." Ethan, who had been listening with his customary serenity, abruptly stopped her with a crisp and alert tone. "Wait," he murmured, piercing through her worry like a dagger. "Do you smell that?" Alyssa halted in mid-sentence, her brow furrowing in perplexity. "Smell what?" she inquired, her voice filled with anxiety. Ethan smelled the air, moving slowly and deliberately. Something metallic, almost sweet. "It is faint," but before he could continue, Alyssa's vision started to swim. Her grasp on the phone loosened, and a wave of dizziness rushed over her. The room seemed to tilt, and the edges of her vision became black. "Ethan," she said, barely audible, "I don't feel." Her knees buckled, and she collapsed forward onto the counter, the phone slipping from her hand and clattering to the floor. Across the room, Ethan staggered, his hand gripping the edge of the table for support before his legs gave out beneath him. He fell heavily, crumpling into an unconscious heap on the tiled floor. The house became quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the sound of Alyssa's phone buzzing on the ground, unanswered. A faint whiff of something chemical remained in the air, unseen and insidious, leaving no trace of what had just happened or who may be behind it. The two masked figures glided into the room like shadows, their motions precise and stealthy. The larger one, broad-shouldered and dominant, studied the situation with scientific detachment, his gaze lingering on Ethan for a while before he mumbled. "The Russian guy said it'd be odorless. Guess this one has a better sense of smell than most." The shorter guy, wiry and swift, squatted alongside Alyssa, bending his head as he surveyed her unconscious body. His lips twisted into a smirk. "Makes sense, doesn't it? He's a chef who is undoubtedly educated to detect delicate odors. But it doesn't matter anymore. The job is finished." Both guys moved with seasoned precision, raising Alyssa and Ethan with ease. There was no hesitation, no wasted motion as they worked. The shorter man couldn't resist a grim grin. You'd think people would learn not to mess with the wrong crowd. But hey, their loss equals our pay. The taller one gave him a warning glance. "Focus. We have a schedule." With a nod, the shorter man hauled Alyssa toward the door, his partner dragging Ethan behind him. They moved like a well-rehearsed team, bundling the unconscious pair into the back of a waiting van. The engine roared to life, and the van vanished into the night, leaving the house in an oppressive silence. Inside, everything remained strangely still, as if the incident had been a ghostly illusion, providing no hint as to what had just happened or where Ethan and Alyssa were being led. 3 days later, I stepped onto a plane bound for Cancun International Airport. The low hum of the engines buzzed in my ears as I sank into my seat, staring out the window without really seeing anything. My thoughts were consumed by what lay ahead, the weight of my decisions pressing down like an invisible hand on my chest. I was leaving the chaos of the city and stepping into a different world, one ruled by power, control, and cold efficiency. When the plane landed, a sleek black car was waiting for me on the tarmac, and I didn't hesitate, striding toward it and climbing into the back seat. The driver, a stone-faced man who exuded authority, didn't say anything as the car surged forward, navigating the winding roads that seemed to lead deeper into nowhere. After what seemed like a lifetime, the driver finally broke the quiet. "The boss asked me to give you this," he said, holding out a little black mask. His tone was measured and courteous, leaving no space for questioning. Otherwise, I would have handled it myself. I took the mask without saying anything, my fingers brushing against the smooth fabric. There was no point in asking why. It was clear that this wasn't negotiable. Slowly, I slid the mask over my head, and the world around me vanished into an absolute darkness, as if I had been swallowed by a void. The silence felt heavier now, more deliberate. With my vision gone, my other senses sharpened. I could feel every bump in the road, hear the faint hum of the tires against the pavement. In this darkness, there was no city, no Alyssa, no past, just the icy concentration on what I had to do next. A few minutes later, the driver indicated for me to take off the mask, and as I drew it away, I was confronted with the warm, familiar face of Diego Fernandez. We stood there quietly for a while, understanding the seriousness of what had brought us together. Gabriel's countenance was serene, but his eyes were piercing and spoke everything. He gave me a quick nod before extending his hand for a strong handshake. "Long time, my friend," Gabriel said, a half-smile pulling at the corner of his lips. "Too long," I replied, my voice steady but intense, a quiet urgency that matched the tension in the air between us. Our eyes met briefly, and without another word, we began walking toward a small, unremarkable building nearby. The silence was thick, broken only by the faint sound of our footsteps echoing in the stillness. As we approached a narrow staircase that led down, a chill settled in my chest, and the dim light at the bottom of the stairs seemed to accentuate the sense of foreboding that was growing heavier with each step. I couldn't help but feel that whatever awaited us at the bottom was the point of no return. At the bottom of the stairs, the temperature dropped noticeably, and a figure emerged from the shadows, dressed in an industrial apron and rubber gloves, a look that was both practical and unsettling. He was short, but exuded a quiet authority that made it clear he wasn't someone to be taken lightly. He took a step forward and offered his hand to me, his grin unwavering and almost too serene. "Hello," he murmured. "My name is Carlos Vega. I am the soup maker, and it is time for your bowl." My attention turned to Gabriel, who stood quietly by my side. There was no need for words. His very presence was enough. Santiago's simple remark seemed like a weight in the air, heavy with implications, a silent, unsaid promise. "My cousin here told me you wanted to witness it firsthand," Santiago said. His eyes locked on me, and I couldn't help but grin slightly. I nodded in acknowledgement, my look a combination of eagerness and frigid determination. There was no turning back now. I had gone this far, and whatever happened next was unavoidable. All I had to do was follow through. Santiago raised his hand to notify his soldiers. "Bring her in," he ordered coldly. Alyssa was pushed into the room, her hands bound and blindfolded, her movements stiff with fear. They forced her to sit at a large dining table, the heavy silence of the room pressing down on her. Santiago and I took our seats across from her, our gazes fixed on the woman who had caused so much chaos in my life. Santiago gave me a knowing look before returning his focus to Alyssa. "Now," he added, his voice stern, "we have some matters to discuss." Santiago motioned for one of his men to come forward. "Remove her blindfold," he instructed calmly, and the guy did, drawing the fabric away from Alyssa's eyes. Her gaze flickered swiftly between Santiago and me, terror flashing over her face as she saw me sitting there. "Logan, please," she begged, her voice quivering. "Help me. I did not intend for any of this to happen." I saw her imploring stare, but I didn't respond right immediately. The woman who had shared my existence had no place in my world anymore, and the truth of her betrayal, of all she had done, was clearer than ever. "You don't need me anymore, Alyssa," I eventually murmured, my voice chilly. "You made your own choices. Your loves are all you need right now. I am worthless to you. You should have thought about that earlier." Alyssa's face crumbled, and she burst into tears as she realized how alone she was. Santiago leaned back in his chair, eyeing her with a small grin. His eyes glittered with joy. "You haven't eaten in days," he remarked, almost sympathetically. "It's time for you to eat." He waved, and his soldiers produced 3 bowls of soup and placed them in front of her, each filled with rich, aromatic broth. But Alyssa's stomach turned as she learned the truth about the contents. After completing the bowls, her face grew pale, and she slumped in a heap, vomiting furiously. Santiago did not flinch, and he directed his guys to handle the cleanup. "You'll never escape what you've done," I whispered gently, watching Alyssa break down. The room was filled with echoes of her previous crimes. And in the hush that followed, I knew the final chapter of my history had finished. My future, unclear but resolved, lay beyond the shadows. Thank you for watching. What did you think of the decisions made in this story? Please leave your opinions in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. See you next time.